Welcome to this explainer, everyone! Right now, we're diving into one of the most dynamic, complex, and honestly, high-stakes political environments on the planet. We're talking about Nigeria's political chessboard ahead of the 2027 general elections. If you've been following the news, you already know the fallout from 2023, which was heavily driven by massive youth mobilization, has left us with this fascinating landscape. We're seeing shifting alliances, huge structural hurdles, and deep questions about the future of the opposition. Okay, let's dive into this.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll look at the 2027 Democratic test, a fragmented opposition, the coalition dilemma, structural hurdles, the voter disconnect, and finally, the path to 2027.
All right, Part 1. The 2027 Democratic test, setting the board.
You know, this upcoming election isn't just another standard cycle. It's an absolutely massive test of the country's democratic maturity. Let's ground ourselves in the timeline here. Coming off the 2023 general elections, the power dynamics were basically set in motion. But look at this long stretch in the middle, from 2024 to 2026. This isn't just some quiet downtime, it's a fiercely active period of political realignment. Every single maneuver happening right now is aimed squarely at that hard target date on the right, January 16, 2027. That's the deadline where all the pieces need to fall into place.
Which brings us to the pivotal question that this entire explainer revolves around. Is the opposition sufficiently organized, united, and strategic enough to actually challenge the ruling All Progressives Congress, or APC? Keep that in the back of your mind as we go through the data today. Moving on to Part 2, a fragmented opposition, internal crises.
To answer that big question we just posed, we really have to look at the challengers first. And this brilliantly illustrates the core dynamic at play. On one side, you've got the ruling APC presenting this unified, dominant force. But on the other side, you have a really complex, multi-party web of fractured challengers, principally the People's Democratic Party, the Labour Party, and the African Democratic Congress. It is a very stark contrast, total consolidation on one side and deep division on the other.
So let's break down the specific internal crisis plaguing these major opposition parties, because the details really matter here. First up, the PDP is currently severely weakened by deep factional conflicts right at the top of their leadership. Meanwhile, the Labour Party is actively grappling with parallel leadership structures and some pretty messy ongoing legal disputes. And compounding all of this is an overall trend of mass defections. You've got high-profile politicians just abandoning the opposition entirely to realign with the ruling APC. This actively drains the opposition's strength, and it's leading to widespread concerns among critics that the ruling party is actively maneuvering to turn Nigeria into a de facto one-party state.
In fact, recent business and cultural reports sum up this chaotic landscape perfectly with this exact quote: leadership battles, mass defections, and ideological ambiguity. Now that last point, ideological ambiguity, is incredibly important, and we are going to dig into exactly what that means for everyday voters in just a moment.
Part 3. The coalition dilemma, strategic adjustments.
Now, the opposition obviously isn't just standing still, so we're seeing this fascinating micro-story of alliance building play out. Step 1 was the realization that a divided front simply cannot win against the dominant ruling party. Step 2 was this big attempt to form a mega coalition under the ADC banner, trying to bring together heavyweights like Atiku Abubakar, Peter Obi, and Rabiu Kwankwaso. But then, Step 3 hits: friction. Because when you have figures like Peter Obi and Kwankwaso trying to navigate their own very distinct voter bases, these unified alliances frequently face abrupt exits. This was perfectly exemplified by Obi's sudden pivot to a new party platform, leaving the ADC arrangement behind entirely.
And make no mistake, this strategic shifting has caught the full attention of the ruling APC. According to the sources, the ruling party is looking inwardly and very closely monitoring the movement of Peter Obi and all these new political realignments. They are actively analyzing every single move the opposition makes right now.
But why do these alliances keep faltering? Well, analysts note that any coalition attempt right now lacks two crucial things: a clearly defined leadership structure and a coherent policy agenda. Think about it. Without someone clearly steering the ship and a shared map of where they're actually going, any attempt at unity is just going to remain entirely superficial. Let's see how this builds into an even larger systemic problem.
Section 4. Structural hurdles, systemic disadvantages. We need to shift our focus to the institutional roadblocks that are creating a totally uneven playing field. Now, what's really interesting here is how the data breaks down these exact systemic disadvantages. First, defections constantly drain momentum and resources from the opposition. Second, there's immense electoral and legal uncertainty.
The opposition actively claims that the ruling party exerts undue influence over the judiciary apparatus and law enforcement, and they argue this completely disrupts their ability to plan and campaign securely. And third, media constraints. Opposition figures have heavily criticized recent broadcasting regulations, arguing they potentially limit free expression at the exact moment they need to be reaching out to the public.
Add to those hurdles that critical concept we mentioned a minute ago, ideological ambiguity. Basically, this is a political state where campaigns become personality-driven rather than policy-driven. The result? It leaves voters without a clear alternative vision. When parties don't stand for specific, differentiated policies, voters really struggle to distinguish what the opposition would actually do differently from the ruling party.
Section 5. The voter disconnect. Public sentiment.
Ultimately, the final decider of this entire landscape is the Nigerian voters themselves. But check out this powerful observation from political observers. They note that the opposition appears unclear of what exactly they are offering voters beyond dissatisfaction with the current administration. It really highlights a massive failure in messaging. I mean, simply pointing out what is wrong isn't the same as providing a clear roadmap to fix it, right? And yet, despite all the opposition's missteps, deep public grievances create a massive untapped opportunity. Voter demand for change is being heavily driven by real, everyday issues: intense economic hardship, broad dissatisfaction with government policies, and major ongoing security concerns. The appetite for an alternative is visibly there in the electorate. We literally saw this raw energy vividly mobilized by young Nigerians during the Obi movement back in 2023.
So the big transitionary question is, can public dissatisfaction actually translate to victory? We know from the success of new political movements in the previous elections that voter behavior in Nigeria can shift incredibly rapidly if the electorate is properly motivated. The potential energy is totally there. It just needs a unified conduit to channel it.
Part 6, the path to 2027, the final assessment.
So the crucial takeaway is summarized right here in what absolutely must happen next. Clearly laying out the data we've analyzed, there are 3 mandatory reforms the opposition must achieve if they want to become a viable threat. Number 1, they have to resolve their internal factional conflicts immediately. Number 2, they have to build a credible, genuinely united coalition with clearly defined leadership. And number 3, they must present a clear, compelling alternative policy vision to the electorate. They've got to move beyond just personality politics.
And here is the objective, fact-based conclusion drawn from all our analyzed sources. Without these specific reforms, the ruling party is highly likely to maintain its significant advantage. The structural hurdles, combined with a highly fractured opposition, basically mathematically and strategically favor the dominant incumbent right now. Which leaves us with this final, lingering thought. Will the opposition manage to unite in time, or is the 2027 election actually being decided right now in these backrooms and fractured coalitions long before the polls even open? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. This is a rapidly evolving political space.